Not many people are going to buy this MG, the $115,000 Cyberster electric roadster, but thousands of Australians are going to buy this, the new generation ZS compact SUV. Hi, I'm Jez, and you're watching Chasing Cars. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Okay, we're going to start off with pricing because it was such an important factor with the original ZS and the ZST. Starting price, well, we were told from $33,990 drive away at the launch, but it turns out that's a limited time offer only, maybe until the end of 2024, we're not quite sure, because on the MG Australia site you've got to go to the view offers to get that lower price. But you can see that the reality is you've got to pay $37,000 drive away depending on state, and that's for the entry-level hybrid Excite, or from about $40,000 drive away for the range-topping Essence hybrid that we have here. The EV version, that's not going to be replaced directly, that will be another model with a different badge in 2025. But there will be cheaper versions of the ZS coming, which are going to be petrol engines, either normally aspirated or turbocharged. So the ZS, what do we think of the styling? The original ZS for 2017, a bit cheap looking. The ZST, which was essentially a facelift, improved the looks at the front and the rear at least. But I think this is another step forward. You could say, yeah, look, it's a little bit derivative. It's a bit of a safe play. It's not distinctive like a Hyundai Kona hybrid, for example. But I think particularly at the front, there's a nice treatment here with the bonnet that overlaps the grille here. Now an octagonal shape grille. It was previously hexagonal. Sportier looking bumper. And now it kind of now fits in with that MG family face when you compare it with the MG3 city car, which this car is related to, and the HS mid-sized SUV. This is the range-topping Essence model. So actually, you can't really tell the difference between that and the entry-level hybrid Excite. The main giveaway are the wheels. So the Essence comes with 18-inch alloys with this design, where the Excite comes with 17-inch alloys with a telephone dial design. As a new generation vehicle, of course, the ZS has grown in size by nearly 11 centimetres in length. It's now just over 4.4 metres. So it's at the longer end of the spectrum for compact SUVs, but there's still quite a bit of a gap to the HS mid-size SUV, which is 4.7 metres long. Boot space is one of the biggest gains for the extra length that ZS gets, but a negative to start with, no auto tailgate, even on this range-topping Essence. So luggage capacity is up by 85 litres, quite a bit, to 443 litres. That makes this one of the biggest boots in the segment, way more than you'll get with a Honda HR-V hybrid, for example. Not quite as much as a Nissan Qashqai e-Power, but that car is really expensive, from above $50,000, so not really a contender for this ZS. What do you actually get inside the boot? Well, it's kind of fairly basic. It is a 2-level floor, so you can push this down to get, I'm sure that's for the maximum 443 litres, but you need to keep it level, the highest level, to make sure that it's a flat boot space when you fold down those 60-40 split seat backs. You get one little light here. There's a couple of little bag hooks, but there's no like little nice extras such as a 12-volt socket. The ZS is related to the MG3, but you wouldn't know it by the interior because it's a completely different design and a better design in my opinion. For a start, the dual digital displays that you get, they're more naturally integrated into the dash. It's also a nice theme that MG uses for the ZS interior, and that's a hexagon theme, so you get that for the shape of the air vents on the sides and in the middle, and even interestingly for the central touchscreen. So the quality, we're in the Essence flagship, so it's lathered in pleather on the dash, on the door trim. The seats are also pleather. So that kind of makes it feel like a little bit more upmarket. I still think the design's a little bit on the safe side and a little bit superficial. It's not even what you would call semi-premium, but it's definitely smarter than the previous ZS, ZST. And something else I've also noticed just by running my fingers around the joins, say on the center console, where previously you might have had some little sort of sharp ridges, it's all nice and smooth. So interior quality is on the up with MG. So if you choose to pay the $3,000 extra for the Essence over the Excite, what are some of the extras that you get? Well, one of them is a panoramic sunroof. You get a leather rather than pleather steering wheel, much nicer to hold. And you even get some little extras like a sunglasses holder up here overhead. What about front cabin practicality? Console bin, it's kind of on the small side and there's no ports or anything in there. Got a cup holder here, which is a slightly unusual one. You've got this little dividing bridge here that you just kind of slide across for different size coffee cups or cans, whatever you want to drink in your car. Glove box, that's a decent size. Get a mini little parcel shelf on the dash up here if your passenger wants to put their smartphone up here. Got a couple of trays on the center console here and here. Though I can tell you already from driving this car, don't put your smartphone on this larger, flatter part because it will fall off. And this is a nice little touch. Somewhere to stick your brolly, just slots in there nicely. Door pockets. Well, the front door pockets on the previous ZS and ZST, they were actually quite well sized anyway. And again, we've got one of these size bottles and that kind of squeezes in. I wouldn't say comfortably, but it does just about get in there. The central touchscreen, 12.3 inches in size, so quite a generous bit of real estate. More importantly, say example, comparing the MG4's touchscreen, which is a little bit glitchy, a little bit slow. This is much more responsive, much better presented, it's cleaner. The graphics and the fonts are very well designed. So we can just click here, rolling through. So we've got little digital shortcut buttons down the right-hand side of the screen. There's some physical buttons along the bottom, though none are for the climate control. That's a little bit disappointing. So it's digital panel only for the climate control. You can adjust it via steering wheel controls, but I'm going to get to that later where that's not quite straightforward either. The digital driver cluster, that is also said to be 12.3 inches in size, but in reality it's really a 7-inch display that's multi-function, and then either side of that you've got some digital bars for the speedo and rev counter. The graphics, to be honest, it's a little bit Sega Mega Drive more than PS5, but it's clear enough. And when you scroll through here, you've got functions that include an energy monitor. Now for a hybrid, I always like having an energy flow monitor because that tells you what's going on with the different components. When is the electric motor only in use? When's the petrol engine in use? And when is the petrol engine recharging the battery at the back? So I guess I'm just surprised that maybe the energy flow monitor is something that maybe could have gone over to the left side of the display, because the speedo is on the left-hand side, and I'd have liked to have seen that a little bit more central, particularly as a head-up display isn't a feature on the ZS. One of the big disappointments for me with the infotainment system, however, is that, well, you've got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, but they're wired and not wireless like you get in quite a few of its rivals. And then you've got these excellent spaces for your smartphones here on the center console, this spot here and the spot over here, but neither of them are wireless charging. And I think that's really quite surprising, especially considering this is the Essence flagship model. This is certainly not ideal. The steering wheel adjusts for height but not for reach, just like the previous ZS and the ZST, and that means that not every owner is going to get their ideal driving position. So a little bit extra length in the wheelbase of the ZS. But look, rear seat space wasn't one of the big issues with the ZS or ZST. It was one of the best points actually. And now we've got even more space. Look at this, tons of leg room, lots of headroom. Not quite the complete back seat because the floor under the front seats is not completely flat. Not a completely flat floor across the middle here for the center middle passenger. The bench, it's comfy. It doesn't have a recline function on the seat back, but that's a pretty natural angle. But another negative, there's no center armrest, even on this flagship Essence. Seat map pockets, well, those pouches are standard only on the Essence. You don't get them on the Excite. But another area where the ZS has improved, the rear door pockets are now much better at fitting your drinks bottles. A big tick for center rear vents here, but also a cross for the USB port. That's A rather than C. The ZS and ZST for ride and handling, certainly nothing to write home about. So is this an area where the new ZS improves? Yes, it does. Look, the steering is certainly not perfect. The weighting is good, but there's a bit of a dead zone around the straight ahead, so it's not perfect for really placing the car as accurately as you would like. There's plenty of grip from the GT Comfort 18-inch tyres underneath, and even look, we've been on roads today that are dry and wet, and in the wet, even then they give you pretty good purchase. You can still get a bit of front wheel spin because you've got that fairly instantaneous torque from the electric motor. That just adds to a little sense of fun. Not sure if you can pick it up on our mic, but those GT Comfort tyres, while certainly good in terms of grip, they are very noisy, quite intrusive, in fact, I would say. So the car, look, it's not as engaging to drive as a Ford Puma, even though that is a rival that doesn't offer a hybrid engine, but we talk about that as a benchmark for handling in the compact SUV segment. But I don't think the handling is either as good as the Kona hybrid from Hyundai either. But the handling, it's what you would call competent, and for the average ZS buyer, that is all that's required. The hybrid drivetrain system has a 1.83 kilowatt hour battery. So that is pretty big. Just to put that in perspective, that's about, well, nearly 40% bigger than the battery you get in the Kona hybrid. And the upside of that is that the ZS hybrid can give you electric power like more times than you might get in some of the other hybrids, including even the Toyota Corolla Cross hybrid. The energy flow monitor ahead of you that you can bring into your driver display, that's a really interesting thing to look at now and again, because it tells you what's going on with the various components, what's the electric motor doing, what's the petrol engine doing. So at the moment, I'm just easing off, and the petrol engine is charging the battery, because the battery is only about half full at the moment. So of course, the fuller that battery is, the more the ZS is going to give you that electric only driving experience. That's what you want, because that's where the ZS hybrid is at its best, at its quietest, at its punchiest. So the petrol engine is pretty noisy when it kicks in, and sometimes that's when it's helping to charge the battery, or it's just helping to power the ZS. So it's not the most refined experience when you've got the petrol engine joining the action as well. The hybrid drivetrain, I think it's most in this element when it's around town, city speeds, in the suburbs, because that's where you're getting more of the electric only driving, and it's where the ZS is really quite punchy, either off the line, getting it out of junctions quickly, and just when you want those little bursts of acceleration, yeah, it's really quite punchy. What's not so good is when you get out on the open road, you get onto a country road that's 80 kilometers an hour or higher, or the freeway. That's where the battery starts to get drained more quickly, and the more that gets drained, the less likely you're going to be on electric only power, and you can get these dead spots on the throttle response, and so you're trying to accelerate more and the car's making quite a bit of noise, the petrol engine revving away, but it's not commensurate with the speed of the vehicle. You still might only be doing 70 or 80, but it might sound like you're doing 120. MG quotes 4.7 litres per 100 kilometres for the ZS Hybrid's official fuel consumption. That sounds pretty good on paper. We've seen varying results. So we haven't really seen much better than 4.8, and sometimes it's been over 6 litres 100. So just to give a comparison here with the Kona hybrid that we've tested not so long ago, we were seeing as low as 3.8 and kind of a worst of 4.5. So certainly seems that, yes, it's reasonably economical, but it's certainly not about to set any benchmarks. Another negative with the ZS hybrid is that you've also got to use premium unleaded, where, again, to use the Kona hybrid as an example, that's happy to run on 91. So you just got to think about that with your running costs. So even if you're using less fuel, you're still kind of got to pay that little extra for the 95 run. MG's persisting with this multifunction steering wheel that we had in the MG3, MG4 and now the ZS, and I'll remain a non-fan. It's more of a malfunction steering wheel than a multifunction. You get these two little knobs on the left and right of the steering wheel, and you can use that to cycle through different screens on the cluster. But yeah, I'm still finding it quite confusing. Even all these MGs that I've been driving lately, even just trying to figure out the adaptive cruise control. It's kind of like, is this the speed that I want? Is it going to set the speed? Do I have the steering assist? That's like the auto steer. Can I switch that off without changing the speed? Yeah, look, I've just found it a little bit confusing. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I need to read the manual. But my view is, if you've got to read a manual, there's something inherently wrong with the intuitiveness of a system or setup, as it were. You can set up shortcuts with the start buttons on the left and right of the steering wheel. So, for example, I've got the right start button set for the regen braking. So you can cycle through 3 levels of aggression, 1, 2, and 3. I quite like the medium 2, not too aggressive, not too much like just a regular cruise when you come off the throttle pedal. 3 is, yeah, definitely quite aggressive. Doesn't bring you one pedal driving, by the way, but 3 can be quite handy for when you're going around corners, because you don't really need to use the brake pedal. You just lift off the throttle and the car scrubs speed quite nicely and you tip it in. Love it. But with the shortcut buttons, the left one I've got set up for the climate control. I was talking earlier about that you can't access the climate control panel by the physical shortcut buttons. Now, if you've got smartphone mirroring engaged, CarPlay or Android Auto, the problem there is that even if you've got the shortcut button set up for climate, you can't access it because the display stays with whatever you've got on your smartphone, whether you're using Google Maps or Spotify. So that's quite annoying. And there's another annoyance for you. That little ringing alarm going off there is telling us that we've gone just a fraction over the posted speed limit. So 61, 62 in a 60 zone, but I can tell you by GPS we're probably more likely doing 58, 59, at worst 60 on the limit. And let's face it, none of us drive around being exactly on a speed limit. Sometimes we accidentally creep just that little bit over because we're focusing on the traffic around us. So it's just, you know, MG is one of the parties particularly guilty of having these intrusive systems. It's not just MG, of course, Hyundai and Kia guilty of it. And it's not a driver aid, in my view, it's a driver annoyance. So I always want to switch it off. It's a default, so that means every time you switch on the ZS, you've got to again go into the menu system and switch it off. And you know, again, it's buried, so it's a bit of a distraction. You've got to come back into the main display, then we click vehicle settings. Again, you know, I'm looking down, not at the road. And then you kind of go, yeah, intelligent overspeed alert. Yes, it's called intelligent overspeed alert, but it's quite dumb. The 0 to 100 we mentioned is 8.7 seconds, claimed of course, but I think a more telling figure where we're talking about the fact that the hybrid drivetrain's performance is not so special at higher speeds. The 80 to 120 acceleration run takes a quoted 7.2 seconds. And that's certainly nothing special at all. The ZS suspension doesn't change hugely from before. It's a torsion beam rear suspension where some of the rivals, Kona, Qashqai, are multi-link independent suspensions. So as we know, they usually tend to have advantages when it comes to ride and handling. The ride quality of the ZS, it's generally comfortable. There's some suppleness to the suspension, but the worse the road quality, the more that the suspension is challenged and it struggles to cope with those variable surfaces. It starts to become fussier, and certainly it struggles to absorb bigger bumps and potholes. In fact, potholes are very much oof moments. Not a very technical term, but that's what I like to call it, where you kind of just grimace a little bit when you hit the pothole. The ZS, ultimately, I think its comfort zone, like the MG3, is around the city, around the suburbs, where it's just really easy to drive. You know, particularly when you've got the electric motor working away on its own. It's quiet, it's punchy, and the brake pedal, that's really nicely progressive, tight turning circle. So yeah, I really like the ZS around town. It's just more on the open road where I don't think it's so good. Is the ZS better than before? Undoubtedly, because where with the previous ZS and ZST we would have struggled to recommend that vehicle, we can now say the ZS, well, it's improved across several areas, whether it's styling, technology, interior space, even handling, though would we like the ZS to drive even better? Yeah, that's for sure. And could the hybrid drivetrain be more economical? Definitely. But it still feels like price and sharp pricing is the biggest asset for the ZS, but that's no bad thing, and for thousands of Australians, that will be a very decisive factor.